proposed by the Democratic Party within the Senate, is where it started. $3.8 billion. And it's $3.8 billion and no changes to legislation, no reforms, no closing of loopholes. In fact, if anything, it is legislation to back the executive orders that were already issued that weren't exactly legal or legislated. So kind of, giving the president his backstop after he's done what perhaps he should not have the authority to do, or does not have the authority to do, but did anyway. So that's one side of what's going on. The other side is a bill that was proposed, or is proposed, by Representative Rogers out of Kentucky. I think it's Kentucky. Yes, it's Kentucky. He proposed a 660 million, M with an M, million. So basically, 20% of the Senate bill as far as cost to provide necessary funding to earmarked directly for necessary programs directed specifically at border security and dealing with the immigrants that are here and any new ones that may show up between now and September 2015. Now, interesting thing about that bill, although it does not contain much as far as direct legislation, it's an appropriations bill. It does include 4 what are called rescissions, where they take away money that was allocated for other things. And this money, by and large, is money that coming up at the end of the fiscal year has not been used and has not been directly budgeted for use. It was kind of those emergency funds, where you say, hey, I need to go get milk and butter and a loaf of bread, and Mama hands you $10. It says bring back the change, if there is any. That's what the rescission is when you have to give back the change. Or Mama hands you a $10 bill and says, hey, go buy that stuff, and if you want to get yourself an ice cream, you can too, and whatever change is left is yours. Well, that's kind of what these allocations were. They went to the store, they bought their bought the milk, the bread, and the butter, and said, I don't like the choices in the ice cream there, and they stuck the money in their pocket. Well, now Congress is kind of saying with these rescissions is, I know the bread costs $3, and I know the milk costs $2. I know the butter was $1, so that's $6. So you had $4 left. Did you get an ice cream? No. Okay. Well, we're $4 short on the electric bill, so I'm going to need you to cough that $4 back up so that we can afford to keep the lights on for another month. And that's kind of what's going on here. And so there's rescissions, and the bill is very direct. It says this is the money for the Border Patrol. This is the money for ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. This is the money for the Department of Defense, and this is the money for the Department of Justice. So it's very targeted. And there's a good write-up on that bill over at BuzzPo. Kind of hits the highlights of it. It also has the proposed bill, which is H.R. 5320. It's hyperlinked in there, so if you want to go read the actual bill that was proposed, you can go and read that. And that's the House bill. Both of these bills need to be passed by the respective houses, cross the street, or go across the building, or whatever the case might be, get entered into the other chamber, debated on, voted on, and passed, and on the president's desk by midnight tonight to do a dang bit of good. Otherwise, they're going to wait all the way until September, And from all reports I'm seeing, the Border Patrol alone is going to be out of money long before, or weeks before, the Congress breaks its recess and resumes in September. I think they only have like a week or two of funding left, bringing them only to like the middle of August. So, and that has to go all the way to the end of the fiscal year, which is September 30th is the last day of the fiscal year. So that pretty much means they're going to be going 6 weeks with no money to pay salaries. Now the guys are going to get paid. I spent a long enough time in the military. Even if the budget isn't passed, they're going to come up with the money somewhere. They're still going to pay the people, and then they're just going to have to refill their coffers. It's like they're going to have to borrow the money today, like a payday loan. The U.S. Border Patrol takes a payday loan so that they can pay their agents. It's kind of how it works. So the agents will still get paid even when they run out of money. But it's the money for contracting people for these additional detention facilities, et cetera, that they're not going to have. They're going to be able to make promises, but they don't have the cash to pay it. So it's kind of like post-dating a check there and hoping that the person doesn't cash it early. So we got that going on. So they have until midnight tonight to pass these two bills. Meanwhile, after hearing about H.R. 5320, some senior advisor over at the White House already put out a policy memo on the president's behalf stating that pretty much stating that the president's going to veto this bill if it lands on his desk, period. Why? Because it doesn't allow him to act unilaterally the way the Senate bill would. It doesn't increase deficit spending. It doesn't increase our national debt. It doesn't increase the power of the executive branch one iota. If anything, it kind of reduces it, it shrinks it down, kind of pares it back to where it's supposed to be. So, that's one of the big bills that's going on in Congress that they have until midnight, or two bills actually, one on each side, that need to be passed, go across the hall, entered in the chamber, debated and voted on, and passed by midnight. One or the other, if not both. And folks, I'm going to tell you right now, that $3.8 billion bill probably is not going to pass the House. Even with a rhino in charge of the House, I don't see it happening. I don't see Boehner really risking passing that bill. Just his own political future would not be very good. He's up for re-election, and you could very much see his supporters turning around and going, if you're going to act like a Democrat, well, you might as well just vote for the Democrat. So you can see that attitude there. I mean, this is an election year, midterm elections. So you can see Boehner actually towing the party line a little bit. And on the flip side, especially with the threat of veto, do you really think that Obama's cronies in the Senate are going to pass the House bill? Especially knowing that he's threatening a veto? No. Chances are it ain't happening. I mean, come on. The only decent bill that's been passed that the president didn't like was the one that Ted Cruz proposed, saying no terrorists are going to be allowed in the United States as delegates or anything else. So, they can take their terrorist from Iran who wants to sit in the UN, and no, he ain't welcome here. That one passed both houses pretty close to unanimous. And the president still said, okay, I'm going to sign it, but I don't like it, and I'm not going to enforce it. That's nice. He signed it into law, but said he's not going to enforce it. The problem with that one was it was dang near unanimous in both houses. If he vetoed it, it would get kicked back. Probably would have gotten kicked back, re-voted on, and passed over his head anyway. So, he really didn't have a choice. He doesn't have a choice but to enforce it. That's one of the things that he doesn't consider. Anyway, if anybody has any thoughts on these, and anybody's listening live right now, I will welcome any kind of discussion if you want to call in. Or if you want to discuss things in a later show and you want to call in while we're live and you're listening to the podcast now, and you can get away to make a call between 8 and 9 in the morning on, you can call in. And our call-in number, I know that's what you're all waiting for. Our call-in number here is 520-226-8567. And yes, you all know that I am broadcasting from this little speck of dirt in the south central of the United States. It's an insignificant little speck that can barely big enough to call itself a state. And of course, I'm referring to Texas. But then you look at that area code, and it's an Arizona area code. Well, that's because that's the number to call into. It's tied to a Skype account, folks. So go ahead and call, and we'll put you on the air. That is not a toll-free number, by the way, but I'm sure these days with your unlimited long-distance cell phone plans, you can afford it. So it's 520-226-8567. We'll discuss that. But yes, the Congressional Immigration and Border Security bills more than likely not going to get passed in time. Another thing that needs desperately to be passed, because this issue has been going on long enough, is veterans. We need VA reform badly, and we know that the president has finally nominated his new VA chief, VA secretary, and the temporary one's been going through and doing a lot of smoke screen nipping tucks here for cosmetics, so to speak. Well, neither the Senate nor the House were able to come to any kind of real agreement on either one of any of the bills that were passed. So they sat down with like a joint committee and went through the various bills and deliberated and discussed and kind of tried to merge the two into one bill that would cover the various bills that are out there and kind of consolidate them into one that's kind of agreed upon that hopefully should pass through both houses with no problem. It's a we'll see thing. But I've got this little write-up here, and it just may hit the wires in an article sometime today, but kind of goes over what the agreement is, and it covers what the current law states, and what was proposed by the Senate, what was proposed by the House, and then what the committee in conference kind of ends up agreeing to. And it changes all kinds of things. It discusses the waiting lists, what to do with people still using the waiting lists, how to reform the architecture, what kind of funding they're going to put out there, what they're going to do to allow veterans to see private health providers and get payments from VA. And it doesn't just go in with the health either. It also talks about the education and getting the GI Bill paid in time instead of veterans having to pay out of pocket for an entire semester and then have to pay out of pocket for their next semester and then finally get reimbursed for both. Having to take loans out many times to pay for their the education that they already qualified for under the GI Bill. So they have to take out a loan, which are paying interest on, and then they get reimbursed the money, and then they use that money to pay back the loan, at least if they're smart, but they still owe the interest that accrued. So it still ends up costing them, and all kinds of other things that come out. Well, it discusses One thing that's interesting that I found interesting is there are some states that under the GI Bill say if you're a veteran, you automatically get in-state tuition rates because that's how the GI Bill covers. And there's other states that don't. Texas last year in the 2013 legislature passed such a bill in Texas. So if you're a veteran and you're getting out, you're leaving service, and you're from Utah or Nevada or Minnesota or wherever, and you decide when you get out you're going to go to school in Texas. Well, you don't have to be a resident of Texas for X amount of time before you count for residency in order to get in-state tuition. If you're a Marine stationed near San Diego and you decide that you want to go to Texas A&M for your college, when you get out, well, you just go to Texas, and when you separate from service, go straight into Texas, and you can start at Texas A&M and in-state tuition as though you were born and raised here. So, and I'm not just talking about a Marine getting out there. I'm talking like a Marine from Minnesota who is getting out of the service, out at San Diego and decides to go to Texas A&M. So, that's just an example, but that's one of the things that this new consolidated conference bill addresses is kind of saying that all states have that there's going to be a regulation or a law in there that says that kind of a policy applies to all states. Now, if different states want to increase the benefits or the eligibility, they're allowed to do so, but these are going to be the bare minimums, so that if you wanted to go to, I'm not sure which states do and don't have the in-state tuition clause, but let's say you wanted to go to, let's pick a communist state, University of Illinois, and you're getting out of the Air Force in Tucson, Arizona, and you're originally from Boston. So you decide you want to go to U of I. Well, you get out, you go to U of I, and under this law, as long as you're within X amount of time of getting out, starting the school there, you're automatically considered a resident of Illinois for GI Bill purposes. And that's kind of a good thing. So, there's a lot in this report. It's 37 pages long, going through, consolidating, and kind of doing the compromises between the various bills that have been proposed and voted on in both houses. So, I've been trying to work on a write-up on this I've had this for a couple of days now. And we'll see if I can get something up within the next day or two that kind of explains a lot more than that. But that's another bill that is expected a vote sometime today that they may or may not get to. It's the last day of July. Congress, by law, must be on recess for the month of August. Now, that's the other thing, folks, when you got to look at things. If your congressman, your representative, comes back from D.C., or tonight at midnight, his term, his time in D.C. kind of ends. He's on recess. He shouldn't be on vacation. That's the point I'm going to get to, folks. He comes back, he travels on Friday, might take the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, to kind of, relax and kick back. Then, on starting Monday, he or she better be going around. And I'm not talking about going around and campaigning, although they'll probably do that too, especially those senators running for re-election and those representatives who, all of whom, their term is going to be coming up. They're going to be out campaigning. But for senators such as Ted Cruz, for example, who is not going to be running